Hey guys, JC Smith here. Today we're going to disassemble this engine the rest of the way. You may have saw in one of the other videos I pulled it apart and found out what the problem was. It had a big old gouge in the cylinder wall here. So I talked to the machine shop and they said I could bring it in as a bare engine, just a bare block, and they are going to overbore the cylinder and put a sleeve in it to bring me back to regular piston size. Regular ring size also. So not typically what I want to do, but the motor ran really good except for the dead cylinder. So we're going to tear this thing down. We're going to get a good look at it. We did do a compression test on all the other cylinders before we pulled it out so that we'd have an idea of what else was going on. All the cylinders were running about 165, 175 pounds of compression, so it was pretty stout, pretty decent, pretty tight engine. So hopefully we'll tear the bottom end apart, see the same thing. So a couple notes about we're going to take it apart. When I take an engine apart like this, it's going completely down. There's several things I do. One is you'll see sometimes if there's two connectors that go to the same place, I'll just mark them so they don't get mixed up. These are actually two different lengths, and the way the wiring routing goes, this hooks on the pipe that hooks in the back of the water pump for the heater. But I just go ahead and mark it anyways, just in case it gets flopped around or moved or something. Second, you don't have to do this, I suppose, but I do. I'm taking this this flywheel off the crank, so what I do is I make a mark here and a mark here, so I know where to line them up when I go to put it back together. You know, it's not really necessary, but I think it's worth it. A little ounce prevention is pound a cure. And the same thing with any sensors I pull out. If there's doubles of the same, I make sure I mark them and I lay them out exactly how it comes apart. So here's the table that I'll set up. Okay, so I'm setting up as I take it apart. This is all the passenger side, then there's the timing cover, and this will be the driver's side. And it'll be the same thing back here when I get to the internal engine. It'll be over here, will be driver's passenger side pistons and rods, all that. Then the crank, same thing over here. So I'll have everything laid out. Now the bigger stuff I just put underneath the bench. That way when I go to put it together, everything goes back the way it was, and I inspect it as I take it apart so I know what else I need to order. Like this tensioner, the bearing in that tensioner is no good, so that's on my list. So as I take it apart, I make a list of things that I need so I don't have to keep going back through and taking more time. And all the bolts I try to keep back where they go. And then when I'm ready to, before I'm ready to assemble, I'll take all the parts and we'll clean them up real good and make sure all the threads are clean, make sure everything's cleaned up nice and neat. No dirt gonna fall in the motor. It's very important. I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner. If I did, that'd be really nice. But we'll clean everything up we can, the best we can. We'll replace everything that needs to be replaced and get ready to go back together. So I'm gonna finish getting this engine torn apart, and we'll go drop this stuff off. Okay, so here's something that I always replace every time, is the dipstick tube, because as you can see, they get pretty rusty where it comes to the exhaust manifold, because you know it's pretty hot. So every time I do this, I just go ahead and order up a brand new dipstick tube. I just replace it. I know it'll last the life of the engine, you know, in well, especially at this stage of the game. But anyways, I like to order up new, and I don't reuse any gaskets. That oil pan gasket's supposed to be reusable. Several others are. You know, for the extra, I don't know what it costs. I've never really put pen to paper, but to me it's worth it just to put new gaskets on. They also came out with a new high pressure, high volume oil pump for the 5.4 and the V10. So we put one of those in too, just because a lot of times, you know, you get a truck, this engine's got 140,000 miles on it, I think. So, you know, we'll do that. We'll put in everything else it needs. Hopefully it'll be a good engine if we get good machine work. We'll see. All right, let's get it apart. All right, so we'll talk about the timing components for a second. This is the passenger side, and I put the crank pulley over here only because I need to know that this, I've got to remember, not that I'm going to forget, I've done it several times, but I put it over here because it goes on first. The passenger side chain does. I replace the chain, I replace the sprocket, all the guides. I don't care if they look like new, I don't care if they were replaced a day before they got torn down. I replace them. I just don't like to reuse the stuff. It's not super expensive, and you know, if you realize what it takes to get back into the timing cover on this, if it does break, it's worth it. Timing tensioners, the chain tensioners or guide tensioner, I never use these, usually because the seal on here from the factory is kind of a printed seal, and they tend to blow out, and when they do, you tend to get that clatter when you first start it up, because there's no tension on that, and basically the chain's doing this. So that's why I replace these. I never reuse those. And you know, just silly little things like this and how I lay the stuff out. And then after I tear it all out and I've got everything here, I'll clean it all up and I'll cover the table so it's ready to go and keep all the dirt off of it. Alright, so when I go to take an engine apart, got the heads off, obviously it lets some antifreeze get down in the oil passages, you know, and gets down in the oil pan. So what I'll do is crack the drain pan plug loose and let it drain, because for whatever reason, I guess water gets past the oil and gets to the bottom of the pan. So I drain that out first in a little stream like this, and as soon as it changes the oil, I'll cut it loose so we don't put a bunch of oil in the antifreeze. It makes it easier to get rid of that stuff, because we have a guy that'll take that. So that's what we do. It's just a little tip for you. Alright guys, so the block's apart. There's the two heads, the one I had troubles with. I'm going to take them in, have them look over both of them. These are the heads from the motor originally. We're going to have them go through these, check them out, see what all they need, and hopefully they'll be able to sleeve that block real quick. We got it cleaned up pretty well, so hopefully it shouldn't take too long. So now I'll show you what's the table and what it looks like with the motor parts. Okay, so this is a table, and this is how I lay it out. That way I know where everything goes, everything's labeled. I got tape on here, and I also have marked on the table itself a number that corresponds with each piston, each main cap, so on and so forth, in the orientation that they go. They start from the front, work their way back. Over here, 1 through 5, over here 6 through 10. And again, everything's set out. So now what I'll do is I will take each one of these pistons, connect rods, everything, and I'll inspect one by one by one and take my time, clean them all up, and then decide, you know, what I need from here. Obviously I have to replace at least this one piston. It's in pretty bad shape. It's actually, the damage that you see right here must have pushed it down just enough that that ring doesn't want to come out of there. The top ring, the top compression ring, it doesn't want to move, so it must be sandwiched in here. You can see that little bit of discoloration. That must have been smashed and rubbing the side of the cylinder. So these are not a press fit, these are snap rings, so I'll be able to change that out okay. We'll check the rods, make sure they're straight. All the bearings looked really, really good. I was surprised. I don't know if this will show up well, but the crank is nice and smooth. No issues whatsoever. I haven't gone over it completely yet, but as I do, that's when I make my parts list and, you know, get everything ready to go. You know, beyond what I'm telling you, the normal stuff that I'm going to do. The heads, as far as they're concerned, I'm going to replace all the lash adjusters, all the cam followers, because those are problematic. It'll get at least the valves that are damaged. It'll probably need some guides and whatever else, so we'll go ahead and do that. But that's it on that motor. That's where we're at. And the heads that we had troubles with, I got it all back apart, as I said earlier. The heads I just showed you are in the truck. They're ready to go. So now it's a matter of cleaning up, you know, crap. We've got a mess all over the place, but like I said, this is how I do it. It seems to work real well for me, and we'll take part by part and we'll get it all cleaned up, get it ready to go. Things that we want to paint, we'll get painted, like timing covers. I always paint them. You know, it's obvious then someone's been in the engine. So that's where we're at. And any bolts that are stretch bolts we'll replace. Sorry, I got a phone call there. Ford uses fractured rods. They're not actually machined. They're actually machined and then broken. Apparently they believe that's stronger. I'm not an engineer, I don't know. But that way they can only go back together one way, that's for sure. Now when I take a piston out, I always mark it. So I'll put a little bitty dot right there with a center punch, and I'll do the same thing on each one. You see the 2 dots there, and then I'll do 3 on this one. That way I know exactly which way it goes, and I put it in that location so I know that is pointed towards the front of the engine. I do it the same all the time, that way I don't get confused, I don't have any troubles, because we all know, you know, the older you get, you start forgetting stuff. So I try and be proactive so I don't have these problems. But yeah, so there we are. Once we get some parts back, we'll continue on this, but I don't expect to have parts for a little while, so I'm going to have to move on to something else. I believe I've sold my property in Pennsylvania. I've got stuff up there, so I'm going to have to get my one box truck looked over, because I'm going to have to take it up there and get all our stuff out of there. I think it needs a left front wheel bearing, and I'm not even sure what else, but we're going to give it a good looking over, so that's what we'll have next. So see you guys in the next one. Alright guys, so one of the things we do when we clean up is the oil pickup tube. Alright, I don't try and cram anything in here. What I do is put this in the parts washer, and I put solvent down through this way to try and flush this out. And I flush this into a canister, so whatever comes out I can see what it is. You know, just a little bit more, make sure there's nothing weird going on. And then, you know, remember this thing had valve damage, so we want to make sure we get in the oil pan. I'll clean that all up, make sure it's good and dry, and we'll make sure we run a magnet everywhere and make sure that we can get any pieces, because we're still missing 2 of the locks for the valve keepers that hold the valve spring on. We didn't find them, so I'm hoping they're in the bottom of the pan. They weren't in the motor anywhere, so they got to be in there, I would think. The oil pump looked good. It didn't have any abnormal wear when I took it apart. I took the back plate off and inspected inside here, and it was perfectly smooth, no scores, no nothing. Doesn't matter, we're going to replace this oil pump, but I just like to look at it when we take it apart. And, you know, you want to know the whole story. You want to know what's happened, what's going on, you know, things that did go wrong or things that are getting ready to go wrong, you know. So, alright, that's it. We'll get back at it.
I'd get it one piece at a time, and it wouldn't cost me a dime. You'll know it's me when I come through your town.